All right, it's 11:30 on Thursday, the 6th of December, 2018. This is the National Weather Service in Raleigh. Nick Petro with a winter storm briefing, and this system that we're expecting over this weekend could be quite impactful. This is the first initial briefing of the series, and we'll be providing these updates throughout the storm, doing daily webinars like this one right here, and updating and sending out PowerPoint briefings throughout the course of the event. Before I jump into the details, I think it's really important that these 5 things here on this initial slide people really take to heart, because I think if there's one thing we can come away with, these 5 things, at least when we're still three days out, are very important. So number 1, know that snow or ice totals can vary greatly over short distances. That is, if there's one place in this country where that is so true, it's especially in the Carolinas, because of our geography and the warm warm weather, warm air sources, the warm ocean to our east. These totals can vary quite substantially. So that's always the case, and I'll point that out here in the forecast data here shortly. And then, of course, winter forecasts can change frequently. Forecasts as new data becomes available, you always need to check to stay up to date. Number 3, we remind folks to focus more on the storm's impacts rather than the exact number. What difference does it make whether we get 3 inches of snow or 8 inches of snow, or 2 inches of snow with some ice on top versus, higher amounts? It's always going to be impactful no matter what. And even if you're not in the snow, wintry weather, there's a risk for some heavy rains, which could cause flash flooding. So always be concerned more with the impacts than the exact numbers. Know your terminology. We'll be issuing watches and warnings and advisories during this event. And then finally, number 5, and this is especially important, rely on a dependable source for weather information. Choose your information sources wisely and follow a name or organization that you know and trust, like us here at the National Weather Service. Let me tell you, there's a lot of stuff out there on social media right now floating around showing big numbers. There's a lot of anybody can go online, go to a university that has model data, grab a snow total map and post that on social media, and then it goes viral. Those things are always prone to being wrong, because there's so much more that happens in any weather event, that those just explicit numbers are, if you knew how coarse and oftentimes wrong those things are, you probably would never even want to look at them. So anyway, just make sure you're getting your information from a dependable source for weather information. All right, let's just jump into what I want to show you, how we think this is all going to play out. So what we have here are 2 models, and I'm not showing amounts here. I'm showing depictions of possible precipitation types. Okay, so keep that in mind. Not showing amounts, but just how this may all play out. On the left is the GFS model. On the right is the NAM model. And the one thing about the NAM model is that it's a higher resolution model. It takes into account more of the physical processes that occur, the more the thermodynamic processes, temperature processes, I should say, that occur in the atmosphere. And generally, but it only goes out, 3.5 days into the future. So we can only use that as we get closer to the event. But it generally tends to lock onto those more fine scale details. You'll notice in this particular depiction, one thing I want to point out is the time at the top, right? So here's the time, in case you're wondering, well, how can I see what time this is valid for? So let me go ahead and erase that. All right, so here we go with Friday forecast. Friday's dry, by the way. No concerns, no issues there. Good weather on Friday. And then Friday night, this time frame is 1 a.m. Saturday. It still remains dry. Here's 7 a.m. Saturday, dry across all of North Carolina. Here's 10 a.m. Saturday on the right, 1 p.m. Saturday on both panels. And I know a lot of activities are going on this weekend. A lot of activities. I've already heard from 3 or 4 people asking me about, well, hey, our community has a Christmas parade this Saturday. How's it looking, and that sort of thing. So even my own kids have outdoor activities planned for this Saturday. You know what? All those plans should go on without any problems. So because this rain, if you will, this initial batch of rain looks like it holds off until later in the day. Now, you might run into a little bit of rain if you're south, if you're listening or viewing, from areas along these counties along the South Carolina border here. Yeah, you're going to see maybe a little bit of light rain moving in probably before sunset. So let me back it up again. Here's 4 p.m. Saturday on the right, and then by 7 p.m. we start to see some of that rain moving in. But clearly, any daylight activities on Saturday should be fine across most, if not all, of central North Carolina. So anyway, when that initial leading edge of whatever it may be, rain. Now the expectation is that it'll initially start as rain across a large part of central North Carolina, and then gradually shift or change over, mix with, maybe some snow and some sleet as the event wears on. So that's 7 p.m. Saturday. By 1 a.m. Sunday, you could see one thing I want to call your attention to is the model on the right. Notice how its leading edge is much further south than, say, the GFS model. The GFS model has, snow all the way up to the Virginia border and a changeover to snow all the way down to, the Highway 24 corridor by 1 a.m. Sunday. Right now, our thinking is that perhaps this model on the right might be perhaps a little bit more accurate in its depiction of the evolution, because there's a lot of dry air up here, and as long as it's dry, any rain that falls into that dry air, it's going to take some time for everything to moisten up. So anyway, and then cool down the atmosphere in the process. But certainly as we head towards the morning hours by, let's say, 7 a.m. Sunday, then it looks like even where it was the model on the right, where it shows dry air across northern central North Carolina, is overcome by the precipitation moving up into it. Now, I will point out too that as you go, say, the further north you go, the more likely you're going to run into snow is that precipitation type. The GFS model on the left and the NAM model on the right both sort of agree that a big chunk of central and western North Carolina, the P type, is all going to be snow by 7 a.m. Sunday. But notice, and you'll notice this green here. This green is just a depiction. Really, this model's trying to depict the processes that are changing the precipitation from rain over to snow. So this green won't last very long. It will quickly change to snow even where you see this lingering green. The other thing I want to call your attention to is in this particular model on the right, notice how we start to see a mixture of freezing rain get involved, and this would be from, say, Anson County, Richmond, over to Scotland, and maybe Hoke County as we head to Sunday morning. Now, obviously, these can, don't take this explicitly. There could be subtle adjustments to the north or the south or the east or the west could make all the difference in the world. Here's 10 a.m. Sunday on the right, and then 1 p.m. Sunday for both of them. And you could see that, across a large portion of central North Carolina, we're looking at either snow or a mixture of snow and freezing rain. And then as we advance to 4 p.m. and then 7 p.m., watch what happens here on the model on the left. It changes over to to basically two different precip change lines. And basically we're talking west of I-95 over to roughly the I-85 corridor, where we see a transition to freezing rain. Whereas the model here on the left, the GFS model, because it's so coarse, it sort of is hinting at that happening, but it's so coarse that it really doesn't depict it and just shows a rain-snow line west of I-95. So either way you slice it, either the model on the left or the model on the right, both suggest that as you go west of I-95 by late day Sunday and say north of the Highway 24 corridor, it's going to be just a wintry mess. Now, let me remove these lines and make one important note here. The track of the storm will determine how much warm air gets involved in this whole process. So these two transition lines, which I'm fairly confident something like that would happen, it could go either way. It can be off either way by just a few miles, can mean all the difference as to who gets what, okay, and how much snow occurs, or how much freezing rain occurs, or yet how much rain occurs. But given everything that we've seen so far, it looks fairly reasonable to say that if you are east of I-95, and particularly south of Goldsboro, so say in this general area right here, there's a good chance that you are going to stay pretty much mostly a low impact event, rain. Now, let me back that up. I probably shouldn't say low impact altogether, because there could be, depending on how heavy the rain is, there could be some issues with localized poor drainage flooding in the areas that stay all rain. Now, as you go, the other thing that looks fairly likely, fairly confident, is as you go along and north of I-85, and I'm drawing it here on both maps, along and north of I-85, those are the places that are most likely to just stay all snow. So, those are the places where, we could see some heavier amounts of snow pile up. Okay, so we're talking the Triad. If you're in the Triad, if you're in Greensboro, Winston-Salem, High Point, if you're in the Triad, you better get yourself a snow shovel if you don't have one already. You're going to need it. It's more than likely that's the areas that are going to stay all snow. So along and north of the I-85 corridor. As always the case, it's this area in the middle, the area in between I-95 and I-85, where the precip changeover occurs, and it could go either way. If this shifts a little bit further to the east, then it's more snow and less freezing rain. If it shifts a little bit more westward, it's more rain and less freezing rain. But for folks in this corridor between I-95 and the I-85 corridor, I would expect at least some kind of a glazing of freezing rain. How much? We're just not sure at this point the exact amount. It could be, it could just be a light glazing. It could be, a couple inches of snow with an ice glazing on top. That's a possibility, because remember when we looked at those images earlier in the day, it was snow. So imagine that, it's snowing maybe an inch or 2 or 3, and then it changes to freezing rain, and then you get a glazing of ice on top of that. Either way you slice it, if you're west of I-95 and south of I-85, it's going to be a mess. You may not get the, many inches of snow that Greensboro, Winston-Salem gets, but you're going to get just as bad impacts road-wise because of the combination of snow and freezing rain, or just freezing rain by itself. Okay, so where that transition occurs, this is a typical Carolina storm. It shifts, and it's not always evident until the day of where exactly those concrete precip type changeovers are going to occur. But I think this model that we're looking at here on the right side is probably depicting it pretty well. And the reason I think that is because that is what usually happens. That's a climatological solution on the right. Okay, so let me move forward. That's 7 p.m. Unfortunately, the model on the right disappears after 84 hours, so we can't rely on that past 84 hours. So we only have the one on the left, and even the one on the left, you notice, even though it's coarser, it's indicating that there is somewhere in that corridor, even it's trying to change over to freezing rain. So it is sort of more or less on board with the model I showed on the right. And then watch what happens. 7 a.m. Monday, it's thinking, more of a freezing rain signal. And then as the storm pulls out and an upper level, as the surface low pulls out and an upper level low moves in, we go back to snow on Monday into Monday evening. And, it's possible that, this whole storm is challenging, but Monday especially is particularly challenging because, this little band of snow that moves through on Monday, that may give us very little. If it stays to the south, it may just give us a few flurries, or it could give us a couple additional inches of snow. So Monday, we may not be out of the woods with this entire storm in terms of what's falling out of the sky until Tuesday morning. So Monday is a challenge as well. As this secondary part of the system moves through, it looks like it turns cold, so all of central North Carolina sees snow. The question then is how much. It could be very light coating, it could be an inch, it could be a few inches. Right now, we just aren't sure what's going to come with this upper low on Monday. Okay. So I know that was a lot to digest. Okay. So I'll run you through this one more time back from the time it starts, which is, roughly, late Saturday afternoon. That's 7 p.m. Saturday. That's 1 a.m. Sunday. The precip is moving up from the south. It's in the process of changing over to snow. Here's 7 a.m. Sunday. It's snow pretty much across, a good portion of central North Carolina. Triad snow the whole time. Here's 1 p.m. Sunday. It's snowing and or freezing rain, across a good portion of central North Carolina, except for east of I-95, south of Goldsboro, where it probably is just going to stay rain there. So if you're in Sampson County, if you're in southern Wayne, if you're in eastern Cumberland, in points east and south, you're probably going to be okay, overall. And then we get into that mixture there by Sunday evening, where we start to see that freezing rain and perhaps some ice accumulation there. And then as we go through into Monday, a lot of question marks for Monday. So, stay tuned for sure. All right. So that's the way we think this is all going to play out. Sorry, that took a little while to get through. But here's kind of a way to summarize it all. Multiple inches of snow, western and central Piedmont counties, particularly west of the US 1 corridor. Ice, there could be, in the worst case scenario, perhaps maybe a quarter inch of ice. We'll see between the I-85 corridor and the I-95 corridor. And then wind. I wanted to address the wind too, because this is going to be a windy system. A strong low pressure system passing by to our south will put us on a strong north to northeast surface winds that could gust up to 35 miles per hour. I bet you there's probably still a lot of weakened trees across the larger region due to the hurricanes and soils that are still pretty soggy. So I bet you there's going to be some downed trees. How many? I just don't know, but I bet you there'll be some downed trees. Strongest winds are expected Sunday and Sunday night. That'll give us some scattered power outages. And then finally, hazardous travel. Roads will be dangerous. Perhaps I even put impassable, but that'll be mostly west towards the Triad, mainly west of the US 1 corridor. And then folks in the southeast part of central North Carolina, don't let your guard down, because periods of heavy rain could bring a flash flood risk. Again, particularly south and east of Raleigh, early Sunday through early Monday. And that's kind of a summary of what the thought is. And then lastly, I'll leave you with this slide, because we shared this yesterday, but I wanted to point out that transition line, the red line, and again, that's between I-95 and I-85. This is nothing new. This happens with every winter storm. That transition line, where's it going to occur? A shift of a couple miles either way can mean a lot less snow and more ice, or maybe less ice and more rain, or, if it shifts to the east, more snow and less ice, or if it shifts even further to the east, maybe the places we thought would be mostly rain could get into perhaps some freezing rain. So there's still a lot of uncertainties. Confidence, thankfully, is gradually increasing, but that transition line that always gives us a challenge is no different with this storm than any others of the past. We do know that if I'm certain about a few things, Triad's going to get some snow. I mean, some shovelable, plowable, traffic impacting snow. Okay, so that looks to be a certainty. And then Sampson County, on the flip side, on the exact opposite southeast side, is probably going to stay mostly rain. It's that area in between that's always a challenge. So with that, I'll be happy to take any questions at this time.